and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at.
The administration is violating our Constitution.
One-on-one with Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul. He talks immigration enforcement, federal funding freezes, and more.
I take this responsibility with deep commitment and passion.
And what's changed in the last year for people returning to their communities after being incarcerated? We hear from the head of Chicago's Office of Reentry. First off tonight, the family of the woman killed by federal immigration agent in Minneapolis last week is retaining the same law firm that represented the family of George Floyd, and they're speaking out. In a statement from those attorneys, Renee, Nicole Good's parents and siblings say, quote, "We want to thank everyone who has reached out in support of Renee and our family. The kind of unending care we've been given during this time is exactly the kind that she gave to everyone. Nay was the beautiful light of our family and brought joy to anyone she met." Attorney Antonio Romanucci says his Chicago-based firm is seeking transparency in the case and plans to share information as the investigation continues. This comes after a Justice Department official said the department does not believe there is a basis to open a criminal civil rights investigation into Good's killing, though an FBI probe is ongoing. Romanucci and other attorneys for George Floyd's family won a record $27 million wrongful death payout from the city of Minneapolis. Illinois residents who don't have a real ID will have more opportunities to get them before the Transportation Security Administration's $45 penalty kicks in.
For many residents, getting a real ID isn't about willingness or need. It's about having the time to get one. So if you work weekdays, if you care for kids, or can't take time off, the process can feel stressful and out of reach. That's the time tax, and it's one of the biggest barriers to real ID compliance.
Secretary of State Alexi Janulius says for the first time, the state's downtown Real ID Supercenter will have Saturday hours for the next 3 Saturdays between now and January 31st. The TSA's new penalty fee becomes effective February 1st. To help folks get the necessary documents, the Cook County Clerk's Office is also offering Saturday hours, and the 15 Chicago area DMVs that already have Saturday hours are adding more than 500 new appointments. The Secretary of State says 5 million Illinois residents have gotten their real ID so far, making the state 44% compliant. A Supreme Court ruling means the issue of counting late arriving mail-in ballots heads back to court. Liberal Justice Elena Kagan joined the 6 conservatives in reversing lower court rulings that had tossed the case out previously for a 7-2 vote. The high court ruling means that Congressman Mike Bost of Illinois does have the legal right to challenge the counting of mail-in ballots that arrive after Election Day. Under Illinois law, ballots postmarked on or before Election Day can be counted as long as they arrive within the following 2 weeks. The justices did not decide on that claim, but will hear another case on the broader issue of late arriving ballots this spring. Up next, Illinois' Attorney General talks about taking on the Trump administration right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Illinois is locked in a series of legal battles with the Trump administration. The lawsuits range from issues like the federal government freezing billions of dollars for child care and family services to what the state calls aggressive and unconstitutional immigration enforcement. It's made for an increasingly tense relationship between Illinois and Washington, D.C. Joining us is Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so suing the Trump administration over federal immigration agents, quote, menacing violent and unlawful incursion in Illinois. Violent raids and encounters with immigration enforcement have been well documented, of course, since the start of Operation Midway Blitz. To name a few, of course, undocumented immigrant Silverio Villegas Gonzalez was fatally shot by an ICE agent in suburban Franklin Park. That was in September. Miramar Martinez was shot 5 times while she was tracking agents back in October in the city of Chicago. And poet and mother Renee Nicole being shot and killed in Minneapolis last week in the driver's seat of her car. The state of Minnesota has filed its own separate lawsuit against the federal government on somewhat similar grounds as the state of Illinois. What does the suit claim is the impact of these federal actions?
Well, it's disruptive to the communities where these roving patrols are happening. It's violative of the Constitution, of our sovereignty as a state, of being able to maintain peaceful communities, and it's inconsistent. It's violative of the Administrative Procedures Act because it's inconsistent with what Congress had intended for Border Patrol officers to do. We are not on a border. Border Patrol is not supposed to be in the business of removing immigrants in the interior. They're supposed to be in and around the border. It's important to note that our lawsuit is not saying that immigration enforcement should not happen. Of course it should happen. It's happened with every presidential administration. But there are what are called enforcement and removal officers who have traditionally done that work on the interior, and they are trained to do so. It's targeted enforcement with warrants, with not being violative of people's privacy, not just doing sweeps and asking everybody whether or not they are a citizen of the United States or not. It's important to note that also that in our recent lawsuit that went up to the Supreme Court with regards to the National Guard, Justice Kavanaugh, in his concurring opinion, in a footnote, reversed on a position that he had taken earlier that people could be stopped on the basis of their race with regards to immigration stops. He said that in the Trump versus Illinois case regarding the National Guard, that should not be happening, yet it is.
So many cases make their way. We just referenced another case that has made its way to the Supreme Court. That one over mail-in ballots from Illinois Congressman Mike Bost. I mean, is this the kind of thing that you could also see before the Supreme Court? Just because the Trump administration is known for appealing a ruling that it does not like.
Yeah, quite possibly. I will acknowledge that this is the first of this type of case. We filed it, and later in the day, on Monday, the state of Minnesota, my colleague Keith Ellison, filed a very similar complaint. Different facts on the ground, but some similar facts in Minnesota and California and in North Carolina and in other jurisdictions. This is a novel case, right? And so we anticipate, litigating this, engaging in discovery. The great thing about the process we took, we've worked over time on this, and it's involved getting information from the public about some of the horrific experiences that they've endured at the hands of ICE and CBP agents.
Yesterday, Professor Harold Krent, he joined us here on the show to discuss this lawsuit and how it might clash with the U.S. Constitution's Supremacy Clause. Here's what he had to say.
What the lawsuits are saying is that this use of aggressive tactics are trying to browbeat the states into abandoning their kind of sanctuary policies or sanctuary city policies to protect migrants within the communities, and that the use of tactics to effect that aim is actually itself a violation of the Constitution because of the rights protected under the 10th Amendment of the Constitution.
How does Illinois' sanctuary policy fit within the protections of the 10th Amendment?
Well, it was Justice Scalia that said in the case U.S. v. Prince that the federal government cannot commandeer states and state and local resources to do what is the federal government's work. The 10th Amendment gives us our sovereignty, gives us a states' rights. It used to be that Republicans would advocate for the protection of state rights. We have the responsibility for keeping peace within our communities pursuant to the 10th Amendment. And when these agents come in and they disrupt our communities, it has impact on our resources, what our police officers have to do. I must commend our local law enforcement, from state police to Chicago police, Broadview police, and other suburban police departments have done a tremendous job of having to respond to some hostile situations.
In a statement, Department of Homeland Security spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin had this to say about the lawsuit, quote, "It is really astounding that the left can miraculously rediscover the 10th Amendment when they don't want federal law enforcement officers to enforce federal law, which is a clear federal responsibility under Article 1, Article 2, and the Supremacy Clause, and then go right back to federalizing every state responsibility possible when they get back in power. Spare us." Well,
the 10th Amendment never went anywhere. The 10th Amendment has been in existence. They're just violating it, as they've been violating other provisions of the Constitution that give Congress the power to legislate. Congress has given the parameters for what Border Patrol officers should be doing. We are not on a border. We are far away from a border. They're supposed to be, their tactics that they use on the border may be appropriate for the border, and that's even questionable, but they're certainly not appropriate for the interior, not appropriate for within the city of Chicago. You cannot be going into people's homes and to private properties. You should not be disrupting courthouses, schoolhouses, and child care centers with just randomized sweeps.
Where I'm conflicted, and I wonder if this is to some degree where DHS spokesperson McLaughlin was going with this, is this concept of states' rights, right? Mm-hmm. Because when we hear about the dissolution of the Department of Education, for example, and education going back to the states, as Secretary of Education Linda McMahon is advocating, that makes some people concerned, because there are some states that have notoriously not done so well with making education the equalizer, right? Yet sometimes those states, which are typically red, would rather have a states' right there. And in this case, it is a blue state making an argument for states' rights as well. Well, do you ever see that sort of juxtaposition? Well,
if you look at like dismantling of the Department of Education, it's not really a states' rights question. It's a question of violating what is a separation of powers. That Congress has created those departments, and if you want to dismantle it, you have to,
Congress has to approve that.
Exactly. And likewise, Congress has set parameters for how immigration enforcement should take place, and you should abide by that.
President Trump has also frozen $10 billion in federal funding for social safety programs, only in 5 Democratic-led states, Illinois included. You and the attorneys general of those other states were able to obtain that 2-week temporary restraining order, which you've got about a week and a half left, which bars the federal government from withholding those dollars in the meantime. What are the claims that you all are making in that suit?
Well, essentially, it's a violative of there's a common theme through many of the 50 lawsuits of the Administrative Procedures Act, and that it's arbitrary in how they're doing it. But it's also political retribution. It's just 5 states. It's a fishing expedition. They're saying this is about fraud or potential fraud, but it's just a fishing expedition. We have systems in place to make sure that people who are receiving these benefits, people who sorely need these benefits, truly need them and truly qualify for them. Could there be a case here or there where somebody scams the system? Absolutely, and we actually partner with the federal government in investigating and sometimes prosecuting such fraud. So this notion of just targeting Democrat states and saying you're freezing funds and asking for something that cannot be produce, that's pretty impossible to produce in a 2-week period of time and shouldn't be produced, is just targeting. It's political targeting.
Your office also released a report this week that found that 4 sheriff's offices in the state had complied with either an immigration detainer or civil immigration warrant, which is a violation of the state's Trust Act, which we've been talking about, the sanctuary state law. What has communication from your office been like to those counties to ensure that they're complying?
Yeah, so these are reports that come in from the various counties, so they're self-reporting to us, and so you know, we communicate back once they alert us that there may have been a violation as to how to avoid it happening again. We're not in the business of trying to go around to, there are 102 counties, to every county and trying the same way as I just criticized with regards to the HHS freezing, to try to screen what every sheriff's office is doing. We don't have the capacity to do that. But these are situations where we've been alerted, and we try to work with our law enforcement partners into making sure they're abiding by the state law.
Couple seconds left, AG. Do you anticipate that you will be, you know, involved in courtroom battles with this administration for the remainder of President Trump's term?
It's looking that way. I mean, it's, you know, and it's not because I'm looking for battles with the Trump administration, but it's because our Constitution and our laws are being violated. I'd much rather work with the federal government, as we do. We work with local law enforcement on a local level.
All right,
federal law enforcement, that is.
That is where we'll have to leave it. Attorney General Kwame Raoul, thank you for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Up next, the head of the city's Office of Reentry on resources for formerly incarcerated individuals. People impacted by the justice system are the sole focus of Chicago's Office of Reentry. The office is tasked with providing access to services and investing in formerly incarcerated people, including housing, mental health services, and job training. And its leader, Joseph Mapp, is out with the office's first year-end report. Joining us now is Joseph Mapp, one Mapp, the director of Chicago's Office of Reentry. How are you?
I'm loving this thing called life. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for asking. So when you visited us this time last year, you were fresh on the job. The office had been dormant for 3 years. What were some of the challenges over this past year?
So one of the challenges was making sure we heard from the people who are greatest impacted. So we had to deliberately and intentionally meet 30 community-based organizations, meet with the Illinois Department of Corrections to talk to not only the staff, but those who are in preparation for returning home, with juvenile detention centers and also Cook County Jail. So just making sure we heard from everyone to inform this work was deliberate and sometimes painstakingly slow.
Among the highlights of this first year report that you just released yesterday are finishing an RFP for Chicago's first women-focused community reentry support center, raising the standard of care and accountability across city-funded reentry support centers, and most recently, a $600,000 micro-grant program to help organizations expand their services. So let's talk about some of those. What are some of the unique challenges that women face when they're reentering? Why is this necessary?
So what we found is 75% of women who are incarcerated are mothers to children under 18. So, and we recognize that mothers, when they return home, they're not only trying to stabilize themselves, but they're trying to stabilize their family. So that in itself is very important. Being a son of a single mother, I recognize the struggles that women face without being incarcerated. So incarceration compounds that, and we want to make sure we're here to support that transition.
How long before we can see a center in effect for those women?
That's great. The center will be opening tomorrow.
Seriously? All right,
Yes.
good to know. Look at that, everybody. We're breaking news over here. Okay, so we're going to come back to that. Have you been able to improve care and support at the city-funded reentry centers?
Yes, in our partnership with Department of Family and Supportive Services, we have been working. There were community reentry support centers that acted as the hub. What we did with these organizations was develop protocols that can enhance service delivery. We did not want them to just rest on providing transactional support, but transformational. We wanted them to walk with individuals through that process, recognizing that each individual situation is different and unique.
So what does that mean? Does that mean, adding additional staff with specific training, or how does that work?
So we've expanded this funding to the CRSC. And what that looks like is we're created a collaborative ecosystem where not only will it be reliant on the CRSCs, but community-based organizations, our partners. And not solely that, just like you hear Mayor Johnson say all the time, it's the whole of government approach. So we're bringing more city departments to the table to create pathways for individuals returning.
And then there's the Returning with Hope microgrant program. What kind of support is that providing?
So most importantly, mental health support is normally stigmatized, and people who've been engaged in institutions tend to try to separate from those structures. We want to create the space where people can heal in community, where we can introduce different modalities for that type of support. And organizations have been doing this work. This is not a new created initiative, but what it is a way to support these organizations so the work can continue.
Tell us about that work. What, 'cause I know we talked about this last time you were here. You're formerly incarcerated, system impacted, served 20 plus years in prison. What are some of the needs that folks have when they return to the community that these organizations are providing and meeting?
And so one of the most important things, you can offer tangible supports. Housing is thoroughly needed. You can offer workforce development and transitional jobs and even permanent placement. But when we think about emotional intelligence, when we think about family reunification, when we think about how the interpersonal skills to engage with people in ways that can help us be successful, even when people are not treating us the most kindly. So these are important because that supports job retention, that supports family reunification, and that supports community building. That was a significant effort on our part.
There are 111 community-based organizations that offer reentry programming, with 40 of those having engagement with your office. Why do you think returning home, I mean, with 111 organizations working on this, right? Like, you'd think the problem would be, fairly solved. Why do you think returning home from incarceration continues to be such a challenge for people?
So just keep this in mind. Of IDOC's, the Illinois Department of Corrections, population, at least 44% of that population returns to Chicago. That's a large number when IDOC has released 16,000 individuals in 1 year. The organizations, the 111 organizations that strive tirelessly to do this work need support. And when you have a collaborative effort, when you have an ecosystem, now supportive systems do not go underutilized. That's why my office worked with CTA to do public awareness campaigns so we can make sure those returning to Chicago are aware of what services are available for them.
How is your office, how would you say you're incorporating input from the people who are system impacted into the work that you're doing?
Thank you for that question. One of the first things my office has done was convene the steering committee that's a mixture of system impacted individuals and those that have been doing this work. We recognize that the funds of knowledge rest throughout the city of Chicago. It's not one particular place that holds all the wisdom. So we lean into these supports so we can make sure that informs the work and the direction that this office moves in.
The General Assembly recently passed the Clean Slate Act during the veto session, and this helps people to receive automatic records sealing for certain offenses, of course. How is the city, how is your office working with state lawmakers to further support reentry?
So thank you for that question. We have a individual in our office, Hallie Lovin. She's in charge of policy and she's building out, she's working with the mayor's office policy team as well as community-based stakeholders, advocates, and we're meeting with aldermen now so we can begin to address some of these challenges that may be systemic and creating barriers, intentional or unintentional. We want to remove those so we can, and also I must add that our partners in the circuit court have been working with us, partners in the state's attorney's office, public defender's office. We ensure that we work hard to make sure that everyone is at the table, every voice is lifted up, so we can approach this with.
It's a whole ecosystem.
Yes.
Yes, it is. All right, that's where we'll have to leave it. Joseph Mapp, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me again.
You bet. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Reflecting the people and perspectives that make up our communities, this story is part of Chicago Tonight, Black Voices.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Former Mayor Lori Lightfoot joins us to discuss her latest venture, documenting alleged abuse by federal immigration agents. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm, righting the heaviest wrongs for more than 40 years.